Number 5 on this list is Cismigiu Hotel. Located in Bucharest, this hotel was initially built over 100 years ago in 1912 and was first called the Palace Hotel. It was called this because it truly was a marvel back then and was one of the most beautiful spots in the country. The architect who built it owned the property until 1948 when it was ultimately taken by the state. This is where it was given the name that it has today. For the next 20 years or so, the hotel thrived and wasn't only just a spot for the super wealthy to vacation, but was also a spot of parliamentary meetings and other things of great importance. In 1970 though, this hotel shut down. It was simply a side effect of the communist wave that was sweeping through this part of the world, and therefore the hotel was neglected for 20 years until finally it reopened in 1990. It wasn't used as a hotel anymore though, but rather as student housing for the students enrolled in the Academy of Film and Theatre. It was during this phase when Cismigiu Hotel saw the tragedy that haunts it to this day. Nelly Bajan was a young student who was staying here during her time in school. The semester had come to an end though, and it was Christmas time when the incident happened. She was one of the only students who didn't go home for Christmas and instead decided to stay in her dorm. One evening she was walking down the hall, and due to some of the lights being out, she stepped into the elevator shaft where there was no elevator waiting for her. She fell down several stories and landed at the bottom of the shaft, writhing in agony. She didn't die immediately though. In fact, it took her over 3 hours to finally die from her wounds. 3 hours where she was screaming and yelling for help, but nobody could hear her because they were all home for Christmas. Now her spirit haunts this place, and many students have reported hearing cries for help coming from nowhere. Some have seen her ghost standing at the end of the hallway, looking as if she's desperate for someone's attention. The sad thing about this is that if it would have happened at any other time when students were in the building, she likely would have been saved and never would have died at all. Just a horrible tragedy that's left its mark on this hotel for good. Number 4 on this list is the Witch's Pond. So this is a bit of a weird one. The Witch's Pond is a very small collection of water in the Boldu Cristaica forest that's said to be haunted. A few legends have come from this place. The first one, which I don't actually think is true, but I'm gonna tell you guys anyways, is that Vlad the Impaler was decapitated here. Now it could be possible that this did happen. The truth behind Vlad's death has been debated for centuries, but I find it unlikely that the killers would take him out to this pond in this forest and do it out here. The second legend, which I think is far more likely and probably did actually happen, is that a witch was killed here. An article on the subject writes, as the legend goes, 18th century villagers put a witch to death in the woods near a swampy pond in colonial era cemetery of Aquia Creek. Her name, it said, was Edith, and her body was tossed into the water. This killing is how the pond got its name, the Witch's Pond. After she was killed, strange occurrences started happening here that couldn't be explained. It said that the water turns blood red in the springtime, and sometimes people see a witch-like figure hovering over this bloody liquid. In other reports, there's a sacrificial altar that spawned here, and she's standing by it waiting to sacrifice someone. The sound of bodies being thrown into the pond along with a witch's cackle can be heard ringing throughout the forest. Locals avoid this pond, and you should too. Also, if you think about it, it's just a small pond, so I don't really know why you'd be going there anyways. Number 3 on this list is Hasdeu Castle. Bogdan Hasdeu was a Romanian intellectual who was very wealthy at the end of the 18th century. Bogdan, even though he put lots of effort into his work and business, put the most of his time into his daughter. Iulia Hasdeu was his daughter, and in Bogdan's eyes could do no wrong. That's why when she passed very unexpectedly at the age of 19, Bogdan fell into a deep depression. While she was alive, she was rather remarkable. In her early teens, she knew 7 languages and had already graduated several prestigious schools for piano and vocals. She apparently excelled at her schooling as well and was set to have a very fruitful life if she hadn't been taken too early due to tuberculosis. Bogdan, as I mentioned, didn't respond super well to this and reacted by building the Hasdeu Castle. Little did he know that it was going to be haunted. Apparently he partook in spiritism sessions with people who were trained in reaching out to the dead. In these sessions he would communicate with his daughter's ghost, and she would tell him how she wanted her castle to be constructed. This is how it was built, and everything that he decided to do and tell the architect apparently came directly from the ghost of his daughter. Her ghost didn't just leave things be when this castle was finished though. In fact, she fully took up residence here. It's said that the ghost of this girl can be spotted walking throughout the halls of this castle very often. Many people report hearing the sound of a piano playing, assumingly at the hands of this ghost. What's even creepier though is that this piano playing will instantly be followed by the applause of her dead father. Also, this castle has several rooms specifically made for spiritual rituals and also an area to worship Satan. From what I've heard, the ghost here isn't particularly dangerous in nature, but it still sounds like one of the creepier spots in the whole country. Number 2 on this list is Poenari Fortress. This fortress has been riddled with death and destruction ever since it was first built. Even though in the first part of this series we talked about Dracula's castle, this is the castle where Vlad the Impaler, the inspiration for Dracula's character, spent a large part of his time. It's said that he saw the ruins of a fortress here at the beginning of his rule and thought that it would be a great place for a stronghold. He enslaved his enemies and worked them around the clock to revive the fortress to its former glory. Many of them died due to the extensive labor and fatigue, and those who didn't were killed by being impaled. Now, it's said that some of their spirits haunt this place, but they aren't the only ghost that still lingers here. The most notable haunting of this place is actually done by Vlad the Impaler's wife. During Vlad's reign, this fortress fell under siege by his enemies. Vlad was able to escape the castle, but his wife wasn't so lucky. The castle was falling, and rather than get captured by the oncoming army, she decided to fling herself off of the castle walls over top of a cliff. Her body fell far and dropped into a river many hundreds of feet below. It's said that the river ran red with blood, and it was nicknamed the Lady's River following this. Her ghost now forever wanders around this castle restless. Some say that her soul can never find peace because she could never forgive her husband for abandoning her all those years ago. This is why locals say that she has it out for any married men that visit the castle. Although visiting this castle would definitely make for a fun day trip, it might just not be worth it. Number 1 on this list is Hoia Baciu Forest. Often referred to as the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania, this forest is on pretty much everyone's list when it comes to the most haunted forests in the world. It all started when in 1968 a military technician took a photo of the area and captured what looked to be a UFO hovering over top of the woods. An article from My Best Place writes, after this incident, other inexplicable events soon followed, including the disappearance of a shepherd and his 200 sheep which were never found again, and the disappearance of a 5-year-old girl who later reappeared 5 years later wearing the same clothes and without having aged even one day. There have also been many first-hand reports from people who have entered the forest only to come out with burns, severe rashes, headaches, and a high fever which they didn't have before. Some studies have revealed higher than usual radioactivity produced by natural uranium present in the subsoil. The part in that article about burns and rashes and other things is one of the most common reports described by the people who go here. It seems that everyone who enters into these woods leaves with some sort of trauma. Most of that trauma is mental though. Feelings of despair and depression are widely documented from pretty much everyone who steps foot into this forest. All of the numerous reports, the photographs, and the general lore around this place has to make it the most haunted spot in all of Romania. Definitely not a forest that I recommend going to if you're looking to get outdoors. Number 5 on this list is Kaciny Castle. Kaciny Castle was a castle built in the 13th century in south-central Poland. This castle was host to many battles over the years until it ultimately fell in the 18th century. Many Polish kings lived in this castle, at least at one point of their reign, and at one point it was rather marvelous. Now it's a ruin of its former self and still haunted by a ghost of a past royal. Queen Bona Sforza lived a very interesting and lavish lifestyle for someone in the 1500s. She was initially born in Milan to a very wealthy and powerful Italian family. This family's influence was vast, and many powerful people wanted to wed Bona Sforza. Eventually, Polish King Sigismund, nicknamed the Old, was the selected suitor and the pair got married. This made Bona Sforza Queen Bona Sforza of Poland. It's the ghost of this Polish queen that is said to haunt the castle walls to this day though. A lady in white that floats through the walls of the ruined castle searching for something. Or at least that's what people have reported when they've seen her. They say that her ghost looks as if she's trying to find something that she lost. That her ghost looks extremely troubled and distraught. This all stems back to the legend of what happened when she was alive. The manner of her death is hazy at best, but whilst she was living, it's believed that Queen Bona Sforza hid a bundle of treasure somewhere around this castle. Many people think it was beneath the river near the castle, whilst others believe it's underneath the castle itself. Either way, now her soul continually wanders the grounds searching for this treasure, as if finding it will release her from this purgatory state. From the reports that I read, many people don't think that she is dangerous, which is a good thing, but they have noted feeling very sad around this castle. Some people have said that after visiting said castle, it felt as if a cloud of depression hung over them for several months after the fact. Potentially the same feeling the soul of Queen Bona Sforza has all the time. Number 4 on this list is the Skull Chapel of Kazermna. This is one of the creepiest spots in Europe, if you ask me. This is a Polish church that was built in 1776 to 1804 by Father Wacław Tomaziak. When he first started building this church, he got hit with a pretty unsettling surprise. Digging into the ground, he discovered bones, and then more bones, and then more bones after that. Thousands of dead remains littered the area right underneath his feet where his church was being built. This didn't stop him though. In fact, it only inspired him. He got the local undertaker, and then they collectively worked on digging up every single remain that they could find. They learned that these dead bodies were from a mass grave that was put there during the 30 Years' War, which happened over a century prior. After cleaning off all of the dead skulls and bones, the father took them and hung them all throughout his church. Now you have this incredibly eerie room with over 3,000 skulls and bones hanging down from the walls. Obviously, a location like this has sparked some rumors of a haunting over the past years. People believe that the spirits of the dead soldiers were angered that their grave was disturbed, and now their spirits haunt the church. Reports of incredible uneasiness is said to be felt by most people that enter this space and stay there for a while. Honestly though, I'm not sure if this is indicative of a haunting in this case. Pretty sure anyone would feel uneasy if they were standing in the middle of 3,000 dead skulls that were all staring down at them. Number 3 on this list is Mount Sleza. Mount Sleza is a Polish mountain in the Sudeten Foreland, southern Poland. This mountain has an incredible amount of lore and history connected to it. There's a great article detailing the power connected to this mountain called Psychic Haunting Mount Sleza, written by a man named Nathan, and I'm going to quote his article now. The truth is that Sleza is an ancient ritual site of local Celtic culture later on used by other pagan societies before Christianity came. Over hundreds of years, the place filled with positive spiritual energies, and for this day, these energies can be sensed. It's also a haunted place, but not by some ghosts and apparitions, but by real spirits, and I'm talking about spirits that were never human. Some people call these entities the spirits of nature. In any case, these are the spirits of the mountain. They protect it and they help people in their spiritual pursuits. As spirits of this sort, they can be very helpful, but also very dangerous if you fail to show them proper respect. Unfortunately, a lot of tourists fail to show this kind of respect by leaving rubbish on tourist routes or even by sitting on cult sculptures. Don't do this no matter what kind of sacred place you're visiting. You wouldn't sit down on a crucifix if you're Christian, would you? So that's the history of this mountain and how it's come to be haunted by some ancient spirits. Now the good thing about this mountain is if you ever do decide to go, you don't need to be haunted. If you walk in and you show these ancient spirits respect, then you may even receive a good vision from them. This place will basically give you back what you put into it, so if you do decide to go, then approach it seriously and you should be fine. Number 2 on this list is Hoia Castle. This is another Polish castle that was built in the 13th century, but this one is far more haunted than the last. We currently don't know exactly what the initial castle would have looked like because in 1909 it was rebuilt to resemble the style of the 18th century. It's a very beautiful castle and located right next to a river with incredible scenery. This castle is absolutely riddled with ghosts though. The first ghosts to mention, and the ones that you would interact with first if you were to visit this castle, is a group of dead that lie at the bottom of the river. Back in 1719, as a funeral was taking place, people were walking the casket over the castle bridge. That bridge collapsed into the river and several of the people who fell in drowned. It's been reported by many people going to this castle that the screams of those who drowned can still be heard as you walk over said bridge. The scariest part is that their screams aren't the loudest ones there. A woman's cries for help are the ones that can be heard the most when passing over this bridge, and it's believed that those cries belong to Joachim von Nitz's wife. Joachim was one of the owners of this castle during its history, and what he's remembered for at this location is rather brutal. His wife had an affair and got pregnant with another man's child. Joachim felt exceptionally betrayed and hurt, so he responded by drowning his wife in that river. This wasn't enough for him though, because he actually allowed her to give birth, and then as she watched, he took her newborn child and bricked it up in the chimney. This is why when people pass by the chimney in this castle, the screaming of a newborn can be heard ringing throughout. Believe it or not though, there's still another ghost that haunts this place. This woman's name was Gertrude and she lived at this place before any of the other ghosts did. One evening she got in a heated argument with her brother. This sparked her inevitable betrayal, where she set an army upon this castle. They didn't conquer the castle though, and she was found out. Her brother held nothing back and beheaded her for her actions, whilst also cursing her in the process. Now her spirit is cursed to live in this castle forever. For anybody that's counting, that makes 4 separate ghosts that live at this castle. Certainly not a spot that I would recommend visiting. Number 1 on this list is the Riese Complex. The Riese Complex is a massive underground city with a connection of tunnels that is located inside the Owl Mountains. This was a project that the Germans started in World War II in 1943. Now, the exact purpose behind this project is currently unknown. However, most assume that it was going to act as a secret German military defense base. It was never fully finished, with about only half of the project getting constructed. But if it ever was fully constructed, then capturing it would have been extremely difficult, considering it would have been impossible to bomb as it's located in a mountain, and physically storming up said mountain to take it would have proven even more challenging. Even though it's only half finished, there was still a massive amount of infrastructural work done on this project. It's estimated that 257,000 cubic meters of reinforced concrete was brought into these tunnels during the 2 years it was under construction. It's also believed that some of the tunnels and pathways haven't even been discovered yet. This is partly because some of the tunnels have flooded over the years, but frankly, could be a blessing in disguise, as they're said to be very haunted. Now, I don't think I need to describe in detail some of the brutalities that the Germans committed during World War II. We're all aware of how abhorrent some of those actions were. The construction of this project, it was no exception. Many of the prisoners who were forced to work on this complex were either killed or died from being overworked. Lots of people lost their lives far too soon, and it's really sad to think about. The people who have been in these tunnels have said that all of that brutality left its mark. Some of the souls of those who died here still haunt it to this day. People have reported seeing ghostly apparitions wandering through the tunnels, and the sounds of hard labor reverberating throughout. I'm not actually even sure if you can visit this place, but I wouldn't recommend going even if you could.
Number 5 on this list is the Château de Camargue. The Château de Camargue is located in Périgord, an ancient region of France. The chateau isn't as beautiful as it once was, some of its former glory lost to time and also to war. This chateau was a critical point of interest in the 100 Years' War between France and Britain. It was the host to one of the more brutal fights that the war ever saw, and was eventually captured by the British. As was typical back then, when you captured a place, many of the people that were running that place were either captured or put to death. One person of interest was put to death by being beheaded, and that was the young lover of the daughter of the Earl of Camargue. It's said that this man was deeply in love with the daughter and that she was in love with him as well. His beheading didn't seem like a major point of interest to the British at the time, but it actually left a bit of a spirit behind. What's really interesting about this story though is that it wasn't the spirit of this young man that was left behind, it also wasn't the spirit of the young daughter or even the Earl of Camargue himself. In fact, it was the spirit of this young man's horse. The horse that this young man rode into battle with to attempt to defend the chateau, and the horse that he had his whole life. Its ghost has yet to pass on. It's said that the ghost of this horse wanders the grounds of the chateau searching for its master. People who have ventured into the castle have reported hearing the clicking of hooves and a deep groan from a horse. People have also reported seeing this dead horse's ghost walking around the grounds of the chateau as if it was defending it from potential invaders like it did in the past. It's suggested that if you do intend to visit this chateau, that you don't bring any negative energy with you. The horse could potentially interpret this as a threat and come after you. Some have even suggested bringing a carrot or an apple and leaving it at the front of the chateau as a sign of good faith towards this ghostly steed. Number 4 on this list is the Palais Des Tuileries. The Palais des Tuileries is home to one of France's most known ghosts, who has been nicknamed the Red Man. The Red Man has been around for several hundred years and has 2 potential stories of origin. The first story talks about a man nicknamed Jack the Skinner worked for Catherine de' Medici after her husband Henry II died. He worked as a hitman for her and would be sent to murder potential political foes. He was exceptional at his work, but eventually there grew a time where the Queen was worried that he knew too much about her. After all, he knew exactly how many people she had had executed, considering he had done the executing. To make sure her secrets were safe, she had another man murder him. He killed him in the garden, which I should note is typically the area linked to this haunting, and then he left his body in said garden. When he came back to fetch the corpse, It was missing. Then, the queen's astrologist told her that he foretold some great disaster happening to the people of Tuileries and that John would be at the forefront of it. Since then, whenever the Red Man appears, it's said that a tragic event will happen to the people surrounding his appearance. The second origin story is that when this palace was built, the Red Man was already there. This ghost spoke to Catherine de' Medici and foretold her death, and even though she forsook him and the palace that she had built, the prediction he had made turned out to eventually be true. Pierre-Jean de Béranger, a famous French poet, describes the Red Man as being a small man clothed from top to toe in scarlet, whose eye is so piercing and unearthly that it terrifies the most courageous. He never speaks, nor are his visits of much length. He vanishes soon after his presence is discovered. This has been echoed throughout time, as many French nobles have received visits from the Red Man before. Henry IV, Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette have all had visits from him in the past. There's even a story talking about how the Red Man appeared in front of Napoleon right before his death. There are tons of beautiful palaces in France, and if it was me, I'd avoid this one and go to one of them. Better to be safe than sorry when we're dealing with a devil-like demon whose presence means impending doom. Number 3 on this list is the Rue Des Chantres. This is considered by most to be the most haunted streets in France. It's located in Paris on the island and is right next to the Notre Dame Cathedral. This street is said to be haunted by the ghosts of many children. As with most ghost stories, this didn't come out of thin air, but from a horrible tragedy that took place on this street just over 100 years ago. In the early 1900s, there was a hotel that was located on this street. This hotel didn't really act as a hotel though, because during that time there was a massive outbreak of tuberculosis. The children in the area who had come down with the disease were sent to this hotel to quarantine. They were locked in the bedrooms of this hotel and couldn't leave at any point for risk of infecting other people. Some children died during these quarantines, which is already bad, but the main tragedy happened roughly a decade later in 1910. In 1910, there was a great flood of Paris where the River Seine overflowed and flooded the city. All the children that were currently locked inside their bedrooms at this time drowned during that flood. Nobody knows for sure the exact number of children who died in this tragedy, but it was certainly enough to make a spiritual imprint on the street. Now their souls go without rest and live along the street. People have heard the laughter and also the crying of children. They have heard the muffled screams as if they're screaming through water. They've also seen these children before, peering out at them from around corners, looking extremely sad and lonely. The spot acts as an attraction for supernatural hunters, but a landmark that I wouldn't recommend visiting. Number 2 on this list is Mont Saint-Michel. Mont Saint-Michel is one of the most beautiful and unique castles on the entire planet, in my opinion. How it's constructed and where it's located, it almost doesn't even seem like something out of real life. This castle is located off of the Normandy coast, and the only connection that it has to France is a road that goes underwater when it's high tide. How this place got made has a bit of a supernatural story to it. Apparently, the archangel Michael appeared to Saint Aubert in a dream and told him to start building here. When he resisted, Michael burned a hole right in his head. After this incident, the castle began its construction, and it took quite a while to become the beauty that we have today. It was a work in progress, with more things being added over the years. Now, because of this castle's location directly in the water, it is extremely hard to attack and was never captured during the 100 Years' War. During said war, one of the major commanders of this castle was Louis d'Estourville. His ghost is one of the most common sightings at this place. He apparently is responsible for the killing of thousands of English soldiers and had battles that were so deadly the water around them would turn red with blood. He's said to patrol the castle and act as a watchman of sorts for intruders and people posing a threat. Similar to our previous entry of the horse, one of his main objectives is to keep the castle safe. He isn't the only ghost at this spot though. The ghosts of monks can also be seen praying and meditating at this location. For a long time, this castle housed several hundred monks until they were ultimately kicked out from the space. Their spirits still linger in this place though, although they aren't nearly as frightening as the weathered war general, in my opinion. Number 1 on this list is the Paris Catacombs. The Paris Catacombs is unlike anything else on the entire planet and is the breeding ground for scary stories. These catacombs are a collection of tunnels that are underneath the city of Paris and stretch for over 2,000 acres. The tunnels act as an underground cemetery where they house over 1.6 million dead bodies. This is one of the largest collections of the dead in the entire world, and if that wasn't enough, you can actually see their skulls as they all line the walls. These catacombs are extremely difficult to navigate. Seeing as there are over 2,000 acres of them and it's underground, people have reported getting extremely lost when they're trying to explore them. This is part of the reason why only a portion of them are open to the public today. But all of this has led to a plethora of ghost stories and legends over the years. For instance, in 2004, a group of police officers were investigating an area of the catacombs that was closed to the public, and they came upon something unexpected. A bar, a living room, a workshop, and a meeting area for over 20 people, they were all found. This was alongside a PA system, a camera system recording the area, and a pirated means of electricity. All of this was more than suspicious, but when the officers returned a few days later with some more people, everything was gone, except for a note that read, "Don't search." This isn't all there is to the catacombs though. In the 1990s, a group was searching through them and found a video camera lying on the ground. They picked it up and examined it and saw that there was a recording. The recording was clearly of a man who was very lost in the catacombs and extremely frantic. Scary voices could be heard in the background, and the heavy breathing of this man indicated his panic. Finally, the camera fell to the ground and we could hear the man scream. These are just two of the more famous stories to come from these catacombs, but so many other ones of ghosts or demons haunting the area have come from this place. If you were to ever go here, then make sure you have a strong sense of direction and a flashlight, because the last thing you would want is to get lost in an underground haunted graveyard.